Well, Sharon, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
I always get excited to talk to someone who, you pass the vibe check right away.
Thank you.
Yeah. When we were chatting before we hit record, I was like, oh, is this my new BFF?
Yeah, this is easy. This is the way it should be. Chitty
Yeah.
chatty.
Chitty chatty. You and I got sober the same year,
94.
19 in the 1900s.
We got sober in the 1900s, kids.
So old. So you're 28 years sober. You got sober in 94.
Yes, August 11th, my mom's birthday.
Oh, how sweet is that?
Yeah, can't top that gift.
Yeah, no shit. Mom, I'm gonna stay alive.
Yep, that's it.
August 11th, mom's birthday. I'm noting that. That's awesome.
Yeah.
We have a lot to cover before we get to, why you got sober, August 11th and all that. But we're going to start with a fun little game.
I like games.
Do you? See? Pass the vibe check. It's called the lightning round, which is very slow. It's total misnomer. But the first question we already answered was, what were your favorite books when you first got sober?
Oh, well, that's different.
I just realized that.
This is evolved, Sharon, the books I showed you before. The other ones, I don't think I read a book except a step book. And I didn't read the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous for 5 years. So yeah.
What?
Yeah, I wasn't really interested in actually doing the work. Didn't know the instructions were in that book. Just kept, going to meetings.
That is not so reading. Funny. There's always some asshole at the group that says, this is the big book. This is what it looks like open.
Yeah. Now I was
for
asshole, you. Basically. That was me.
Okay. So didn't read the big book for the first 5 years. So did you say that there was a step book that you liked when you first got sober?
Yeah, I definitely was involved in the step book. I did the 12 and 12. It's part of like my story. I tell people that when they would ask me if I'd ever done the steps, I said, well, you saw me at the step meeting, right?
Can we just say why that's funny?
Yes. Well, it's very funny because there's actually a lot of work that needs to be done, and showing up to a meeting and it has a step book at it doesn't actually mean you've done the work.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, the steps are largely a writing process. Going to meetings is one thing, and the program is the steps.
Yes. So I learned that after 5 years. My first 5 years, you would have not vibed with me. You would have said, that girl's an asshole.
I can't imagine.
Can we curse on this show?
Yes, we can. Were you a little angry in the beginning?
I was angry. I was still lying. I would definitely, if I had the opportunity, cheat, with your boyfriend. I was not a girl's girl. I was lost, lost in early recovery, just looking to have somebody believe all the lies I was telling still. Yeah. Took a long time.
Totally relate to that. Yeah. And I really have compassion for that girl, right? Because I think we learn as we do the steps that all our, character defects, or I like to call them human frailties, are born out of making decisions from a fearful place.
Yes.
Lack of context, lack of perspective. So I like the idea of having compassion for like the early version of us that was angry and scared and making bad choices.
Yes. I love seeing her walk through the door today. And I'm like, oh, just stick around, honey. You'll be fine. No judgment zone here.
Right. Oh, I love that. Okay. I do love the 12 and 12 though. I have a woman's book study every Saturday and we do the 12 and 12 and I just love it.
Oh, nice. I also was a big fan and am a fan again of Codependent No More.
Melanie Beattie.
Yeah, it's a doozy.
Yeah, I feel like under every alcoholic is a codependent to some degree.
Welcome. Yes.
Codependent No More. Those are really, I like, did you ever get the Daily Reader?
The Daily Reflections, all of the 24-hour book. What's that one? Living Sober.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I read everything that was suggested except the book I should have been reading.
I mean, listen, recovery resistance is a thing.
It is. Yes.
That's a real
Yes.
thing. Yeah.
Yes. The rebel was living inside of me still.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
I get that. Do you have a go-to mantra or quote that you live by?
When people show you who they are, believe them the first time. Maya Angelou.
Yeah. I love that one.
It's a
And
tough one.
it is, right? We're like, well, maybe.
Yeah. Could like me, right? Like I was 5 years until like maybe they just need a little more time to keep screwing me over. Just a few more. Yeah.
Is that?
Definitely. It's a hard lesson. It's
Yeah.
a hard lesson.
Notice the red flags when they wave them at you.
Yes.
When they smack you, they smack you in the face with them.
Right. And they're beating you with it.
All right. Yeah. Pay
All
attention.
right.
Yes. It's so funny because I feel like, especially in, before we get sober, we so desperately want to hang our hopes on other people that they will save us, that we are willing to, like, maybe this is the one that's going to save me, that we're willing to look past their actions.
Yes. Yes, indeed. I wrote a chapter about it. It's called My Boyfriend Has a Girlfriend.
And it's not me.
It's not me.
Oh, we're gonna have to talk about your book and your podcast, both with the same name, The Broken Road to Mental Health. Amen. I cannot wait to dig into that.
Yay.
But yeah, that's so funny.
Yeah, it took me a while.
Yeah, it is a broken road for sure. Do you have a regular self-care or recovery routine? And that can be like a morning practice or a weekly schedule of meetings. And I recently heard a gal talk about how she goes to an annual retreat. So I'm just curious, what does that self-care practice look like for you?
Yeah. So I actually call it my mental health workout. So I get up every morning, Monday to Friday, somewhere between 5:30 and 6:30. And I do strength training first, and then I meditate. And through the pandemic, I could only do guided meditation because I couldn't sit within my brain for too long.
Mhm.
And that has continued. So I have yet to get back to silence, but I'm trying. And then I usually do like a 2 to 3 mile walk. I'm very, very serious about a mental health workout because I need recovery just as much as I need to physically work out, ever since the depression lifted 27 years ago. I've really had to work. I feel like I've had to work extra hard, and of course I'm still involved in recovery. I'll be going to my big book study at 6:30 tonight.
So how many meetings do you do a week?
So I do about 4. I'm a
Oh, that's a lot.
weekend. Yeah. I run a recovery journey to mental wellness meeting every Saturday morning on Zoom. And
Ooh.
then I go to one in New York on Zoom because I'm in Tampa Bay now.
Mhm.
And then Sunday, I ride my bike to my 10:30 meeting. And then Tuesday nights, I always go to my big book study. So,
Gotta love the
yeah,
big book studies. So you
I
do
wouldn't.
some in person and some online.
Yes. Yeah. I would prefer them in person, but I can't ever give up that. I started that Zoom recovery journey and mental wellness meeting in the pandemic because I
Mhm.
couldn't imagine what it would be like to come in to sobriety in a pandemic.
I know. Can you imagine? I am so proud of all those people who came in
Ugh,
and they were just desperate enough to do everything, all the
yes,
things.
all the things, all in
Uh,
these screens. So yeah,
yeah, all on these Hollywood squares.
right.
They kind of remind me of like little habitats because you can see where people are. Some people do Zoom from their bedrooms. I'm like,
I
I can
know.
see your dirty laundry.
Yeah, and your nostrils.
Oh yeah, the camera angles. People are so funny. Pay attention,
We've seen
people.
it all. Yeah, we've seen it all
We've seen it all.
more than we
Um,
want to.
I know. What is one thing you wish you knew when you first got sober?
That the big book had instructions to stay sober in it. I'm sure somebody told me, but I wish I had felt it and knew it and said, you know what? This would be a good idea.
Yeah,
Yeah,
didn't
that's
quite
really,
register. Yeah.
yeah,
It's so
I do
it's so
really wish I
funny the
could.
things that take a minute to land. And I think but I feel like it's all good because we are able to receive when we're ready, like when we feel safe enough for whatever
Yeah,
reason, message is received when it's supposed to.
I guess so. But I also wish that there was a strong woman that had approached me and said, "Hey, you know what, girl? You might want to come with me because you seem a
Yeah.
little twisted." It took 5 years. Somebody did come up to me and say that it was a man. But he asked me to come to a big book study, and I've gone ever since. So yeah,
Oh,
I wish there were more women that would have. I think it's different. Anyway, I feel like I could go on about that forever. I did also talk about that in my book. There's a big difference between recovery and recovered. And I think there's just different teams almost,
yeah.
in programs. And I'm grateful that it only took 5 years. I'm grateful I didn't die or kill anybody else with my
Yeah, no
mess that I was
kidding.
passing on.
Mhm. Yeah, that's it. Do you want to sort of differentiate between the teams of recovery, recovered and recovering?
Yeah. So for 5 years, I did. I just went to meetings. I sponsored 3 women in my first year and I could have killed them. I used to say that like almost smiling, and now it's the truth. I could have killed them. I was passing on such a mess. I
Right.
remember taking them to the beach and just telling them to scream at the ocean because I didn't know what else to do. Like I was
Right.
making stuff up as I went along. Like I didn't have somebody go, this is the big book and this is how you go through the steps and they're in order for a reason. And, it was like a whole history.
Mhm.
These guys that like got sober and stayed sober. The rate was a lot better back in the day because they did the work a lot sooner. So recovered is, when you did all of the work and you continue to work, like we're never cured, right? And
Right. Not cured.
people get really offended when you say, I'm recovered, but I'm going to live in recovery for the rest of my days, God willing. But um, I know that I'm a recovered alcoholic. It says it in the
Mhm.
book. So,
Yeah.
but a lot of people are offended by that. And some people just want to go to meetings and just speak at meetings and make coffee. And there's nothing wrong with all that. I feel like that Seinfeld episode, not that there's anything wrong with that. But if you really want to get well, there's a lot of work that needs to be done.
Remember this guy came up to my husband and said, "You on the BB program?" And he's like, "What's that?" And he's like, "An NAA." Like he was like doing his own
Yeah.
thing. He wasn't doing
Mhm.
the program out as it was outlined. And when I hear these stories about people who did not have a good early experience, like they did not, like I had several women come up to me and be like, "Hey, you're young, you're cute,
Mhm.
be careful of the wolves in sheep's clothing." Around here, the women work with the
Mhm.
women,
Mhm.
right? They were like, go to women's meetings,
Mhm.
too. Like if you can't go, I wasn't a girl's girl either. I was
Mhm.
all about external validation from the boys,
Oh,
right?
yes.
Yeah. So I wasn't a girl. It took me a long time to get to really love women's meetings.
Me too. I love them now. I live for
I
them.
know, me
They're the
too.
best. Yeah.
Right. But
Yeah,
I
it's so
did it.
different. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was
So,
showing a lot of cleavage,
did you
in
dress
the
up to go to
meetings.
meetings?
Oh, hell yeah.
Same girl.
Now that, I'm like sober, I like purposely will dress down. I like wear sweatpants, no makeup, my, flip-flops. I don't want to look, I don't it's amazing. Recovery can be really amazing. But yeah, I wore all black and as much cleavage as possible and dated everybody and
Yeah, and you're adorable. You must have been this little blonde bombshell.
I don't I don't think so.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you, but I think it was a lot different then. I was definitely, I mean, I would have never worn like pink or a bright color. Like I was black and dark and I had black eyeliner going across. I dressed how I felt. I
Yeah.
felt horrible about myself.
Yeah, that is very common in the beginning.
Yeah.
A lot of times people when they first show up don't have any sense of spirituality or spiritual experiences. So I like to kind of have guests talk about, maybe I don't know if you have like a spiritual experience at the forefront of your mind, but I feel like that's something that people need to hear in terms of it's not necessarily a religious thing. Do you have any stories about spiritual experiences throughout
Mm.
your process that come to mind?
I mean, there's so many.
I know.
There's so many. Well, first I'd like to say that I never struggled with spirituality. I've always known that there is a source living inside of me, and that has always been very personal. But I'm definitely I don't know how this is going to sound, but I'm just going to say it. I'm definitely not like I'm not a Lord lover. I kind of back off to like,
Religion?
definitely back off to religion, but even which is kind of a contradiction of what I do. I go to a spiritual meeting, a women's meeting in New York every Saturday morning. And like they introduce themselves as like, I'm the daughter of the king, which makes me feel nauseous to this day. I know. And not all of them do it, but some of
That's
them
not my
do.
vibe.
Yeah, it's not mine either, but I feel like there was something pulling me towards getting more comfortable being around what anybody said about their own path when it comes to God and spirituality and whatever anybody wants to call it. I don't have any issues, but I grew up Catholic, so and I went to private school and I live in Florida now. So I live in a place where a lot of people believe in stuff that I think is bad shit. But I have this wonderful peace, and I think my spirituality comes through nature. I've had many, many
Oh,
experiences um, with dolphins and riding my
wow.
bike and just being outside. I find, so much peace when it comes to just being out,
Yeah.
and listening to the birds and like just being in Ireland. I just got back from Ireland and we went to the cliffs of Moher and we
Oh,
saw sheep and horses and we rode our bikes through Phoenix Park, the largest park in Europe. And like that's what I love. Like that's where I feel really connected. But I
yeah.
think just being in meetings makes me feel really connected too to spirit.
Yeah. A spirit for me is like an energy, right? And it's that connectedness that
Mhm.
really is quite the experience.
Yeah, there have been
Yeah.
many.
I want to backtrack a little bit to sort of how we got here. I know you got sober in 94. You're only 21 years old.
Just a
Um,
baby.
you're just a baby. Did
Mhm.
you even have a legal drink?
No.
No,
Well, yes, I did.
barely,
Wait. Barely, yeah.
barely had a legal
Barely.
drink. That's
Yeah.
funny. Um, so I kind of like to start with family of origin stuff because I feel like it kind of sets the stage. Were your parents drinkers at all, or what was life like when you were growing up?
No, so I come from a very large Irish family. My mom has 12 brothers.
Wow. Was she the
Yeah,
only girl?
that's right.
Was she the last baby?
No. So,
Oh, okay.
actually there's only 3 of them left. 10 have died over the last few years.
Wow.
Alcoholism has definitely showed its face many times
Wow.
in my family. It doesn't get spoken about much. Welcome, Sharon. And then my dad has 4 brothers and 3 sisters also. Both born in Dublin, Ireland. So, there's a lot of I just left it. They toasted, I just turned 50. And just to give you some insight, when I turned, midnight stroke, we were all, of course, at a pub. And they said, well, let's do shots. Now everybody knows I'm sober. So they all got shots and I took a picture of it and they gave me a shot of water.
Shut up. Okay.
Because what do I want to do more on my 50th than take a shot of water? But yeah, so alcohol has definitely been a factor. But my parents know, like it kind of skipped that, generation.
Mm.
My mom gave my dad a good talking to when she was pregnant with me. She likes to tell that story about how she left my dad and went to my godmother's house and said, I'm not going to be with a man who comes home drunk after playing darts all night. So, he stopped. And my brother I have 2 brothers, and one stopped drinking on his own about 5 or 6 years ago. We're estranged. We don't talk.
Mm.
He's not in program.
Yeah.
So I say drink. No, I'm kidding. I'm not. You know what I mean?
Hit that bottom so you can change.
Yeah, yeah. So, yeah, there's definitely alcohol within the family. I would say I was the only one that went down a very hard path, but it's floating around there.
Yeah. When did you start drinking?
12, 13.
Do you
I
remember
was
that first drink?
not really. No, it wasn't significant. I just know that I always drank more than everybody else. I remember not wanting to like go to the movies anymore because that would mean I couldn't drink for 2 hours. I was the one buying beer before the movie, after the movie, in the movie. Um, I was, a chubby teenager. I had really bad acne. I was very insecure about how I looked. So alcohol cured that.
I was like in
And
high school.
yeah, all through high school. Yes.
Were you experiencing blackouts at that time?
No, not until after my first rehab.
How many rehabs did you go to?
I went to 2 and a halfway house and a mental institution in between.
Like
Yeah.
they booked you 5150.
I'm not sure
Do
what
you
that
have that
means.
there?
No, I know 5150, the Van Halen album.
um, uh, I guess in California, 5150 is like you can get arrested and submitted to a mental institution for insanity. They
Oh,
call it
no.
5150.
No, well, no, mine was I was mandated to my second rehab, and,
Mm.
they didn't tell me this, which was smart, that I had to go to a halfway house after,
Oh,
and they called it a
living in.
sobering up station where they
Oh,
sent me. It was a mental institution, but they had to put me somewhere before the bed became available at the halfway house.
oh, they didn't
Yeah,
trust you that you would. The bed wasn't ready. They didn't trust you. So,
yeah, yep, and then I only ended up staying at the halfway house for a month because I would have rather been in jail, so I thought, than be at a halfway house where they would make me do work and clean and stuff like that. It was way beneath me. I had many things to do at
many things.
19 years old.
Oh my gosh. So that's the
Yeah.
first time you went to, that was the first or
So
second
second.
time?
So my first was a family intervention. I was 18 and they
Okay.
sent me off to a place that looked like my background. It had trees. It was beautiful.
Mm.
It was in New Hampshire. It was all adolescents. So I had the best time. 2 rehab romances. Got
Two.
kicked out. Yeah, 2. Yeah,
Yeah.
2
Because
followed.
they cycle through at different times.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And one was hotter than the other.
Were
So
they both there at the same time?
they were. Sorry.
Consequential.
I'm sorry. It was always me running after some guy, story of my life.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I did follow my second rehab romance after to where he lived. He didn't ask me. I followed him. So
That's we didn't used to call it stalking.
yeah, we just followed them.
We followed.
Imagine if we could stalk somebody on social media then. Oh,
Hey, you wouldn't even have to leave your house.
yeah.
Yeah,
We at least
didn't.
were challenged.
Right. You had to be a little more resourceful. So when you started drinking, did you have that whole experience of fun with problems and then just problems? Is that how it kind of went for you?
Yeah, it was really just fun. I mean, I really truly believe that when I was in my first rehab by 18, like I did not understand why everybody thought I had a problem. I was having such a good time. I really did not see it. Like 19 when I got arrested, I could see it a little bit, but I was um I was just having fun and did not see it as a problem like everybody else did.
Yeah. Um, what did you get arrested for?
Well, I was drinking with these blacktop construction workers at a hotel, and sounds so ridiculous saying this out loud. And I did not have I wasn't 21, right? So when it came time to pay the bar tab, I gave them they had temporary licenses at the time with no photo, and it just said it was my girlfriend's. So it said that blonde hair, 21. So I gave that to them and then I left because I didn't have any money. I said I'd be right back. I would bring you the money. And her brother was a cop, so that wasn't smart. And when I didn't come back, that night to pay. I did, of course, come back the next day to retrieve my purse because I needed that lipstick that was in it. I don't know. And then, yeah,
Your
I got
priorities.
arrested. Yeah. And I spent a night in Nassau County Jail, and my parents were going to Al-Anon and didn't bail me out.
Wow. So they
Yeah.
were good about letting you
Yeah. They
suffer
let,
the consequences of your
yeah.
actions.
Yes. She said, my mom said, so I called that woman from that program, and she said, it was 12 o'clock at night. I'll never forget. And she said, the woman on the phone said, leave her there. So I left her there.
Wow, that
Yeah.
must have been scary. You were so young.
I don't remember.
I don't remember. That was a long
No.
time ago.
Yeah. I don't remember. I'm sure by the, because my first blackout wasn't until after my first rehab. So I was 19. So I was blacking out then. I don't remember
Okay.
much after 19.
Wow. Do you have a sense of why you were drinking so much so young?
I hated myself. I hated how I looked mostly. I was very insecure. I was, I only felt like I had a personality when I drank.
Hmm.
I felt more sexual when I drank. I felt more attractive. Um, I didn't, I really had a very big problem with my skin. I think a lot of young girls are, we all have all those hormones, and, my mom and dad wouldn't take me to the dermatologist because I don't know, in Ireland, maybe they didn't have them. They were like, put milk on your face, you so
My mom's thing was put a little olive oil on it.
yeah, like
That
that
was the
doesn't
cure
work,
all.
man. Yeah.
So are
Thank
your
God.
parents first are you considered first generation? They migrated here?
Yeah. When they were teenagers. Yeah.
Oh, when you were teenagers. So
When my
you were
parents were teenagers, they
oh,
migrated here. Yeah.
they were
They
teenagers.
immigrated. Yep.
I wonder. So I'm first generation on my mom's side. She was born and raised in Mexico City.
Mm.
And so it's so interesting things like medicine and going to the doctor. Like you had to really, yeah, you had to really be sick to.
I ran a pediatric office for 8 years, and I can't believe how many times those kids would come in for nothing.
Yeah.
Like we never went to the doctor. You had to be like dying
You had to be really
to go
sick.
to the doctor. Yeah.
Did your parents ever like it's so funny because you know how like you overcompensate as an adult for things that you didn't have when you were growing up? Like we have a medicine cabinet that would rival CVS.
Oh yeah.
Like we
Well,
got all
yeah.
the things just in case.
Well, yeah. I mean, my whole career was working with doctors. So talk about going the complete opposite. Like I have
Yeah.
doctors that I can just text and say, I don't even bother asking anybody else. There's no home remedies for this girl. I just call the doctor.
Just call the doctor. Yeah.
Right.
You gotta love that. So okay, so the self-hatred, being insecure, skin problems, this is all like it's so hard when you're young and you have no sense of identity yet. Especially as women, I feel like our value and identity is based on what we look like.
Mhm. Yeah.
Right. And so I, relate to a lot of that, like not like hating myself and not feeling confident about how I looked
Yeah.
and using alcohol to cover. So you got sober. Well, no wonder you didn't open the big book for the first 5 years. You were
Right.
still so young.
I was just a baby.
So you go through the second rehab, and what was that experience like?
So this is the one I was mandated to. Very different because my roommate was in there for relapse prevention, which I thought was crazy. I was like, you chose to come here? That's bizarre. And but she was so funny and she was so wonderful. Her name was Gigi. I'm sure she hates me to this day because I slept with her boyfriend.
Ooh,
I'm
that
not
puts a
proud of
damper on
any of those
things.
things, but yeah, I mean, I was a real mess,
I get it. Yeah.
with alcohol, without alcohol, just a mess. It was different because it wasn't all adolescents. The first rehab was all adolescents, so it was like a real party.
Mhm.
And this was just a little more serious. And than them telling me I was mandated to go to a halfway house. I mean, I really was not prepared. Um, but I started going, well, maybe I have a problem, maybe because I got arrested and I'm here and I can't leave. Like I can't just escape and take a bus like I did at the first one, and become friendly with the security guard and have him take me to the bus stop. I was manipulative, but I had the courts, telling me I had to stay. So that was my second rehab. And then it just, got progressively worse after that.
Did the second rehab give you any exposure to 12-step programs?
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Both of them did. I still have my step book from my second rehab, signed,
Wow.
autographed like a yearbook.
Yeah. We're so funny like that.
Yeah, I have all the literature still. Yep. So they definitely introduced it. They introduced it at both. They took us in the white van
Mhm.
to outside meetings, you know. It was like, don't talk to the inmates. But yeah, like I was going to go to a detox last night, where they were bringing a meeting in, and it just like I had so many flashbacks about what that was
Mm.
like. Um, it was an introduction, but I certainly wasn't ready for it at 19.
What happened afterwards? You drinking progressed?
So I blacked out and moved to Detroit, Michigan, and stayed there for 2.5 years. That's
Wow.
right.
Who
Yep.
did you move there with?
Some guy, story of my life, every guy that I ever ended up with had an alias. So this one, his name was Spokane. So I thought that was a combination of the spokes in a bicycle and cocaine. I didn't know Spokane was in Washington.
Oh, I've never
Yeah.
heard it pronounced that way.
Oh, is it? It's probably Spokane or
Spokane.
Spokane, right? Oh,
Spokane. Yeah,
there you
that's how
go.
but
Yeah, but I thought it was cocaine. That's all I was thinking about. Yep. So I literally, it must have gone something like, "Hey, you want to go to Michigan?" And I must have said yes. And then I woke up there and
Wow.
I thought, well, nobody here knows that I have a problem yet. Nobody here knows I was ever in a rehab. I could, you know, I could start my life here. And yeah, and then I moved on from Spokane to Sugar Bear. And he had just gotten out of Jackson State Penitentiary after doing 11 years.
Scary. So he was
So
older.
very much so, and had a wife. And
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
it was the girl that grew up in Long Island, New York, that went to private school was gone. I was
Mm.
addicted to crack. I was homeless. I was abused. I was raped, anything and
Oh,
everything you could possibly imagine when you black out and move to another state. And nobody knew where I was. And I think a lot of people thought I was dead. Well, I know that they did because the cops used to find my purse in a dumpster and they would call my parents and tell them that they found it. And it was hell. It's to this day, I don't know how my parents survived me, hence why we're so close. They live 1.5 miles away now.
oh, that's sweet.
Yeah. But yeah, it's a miracle that I'm here talking to you, just like I'm sure it was a miracle for you. We all
Oh,
have a
yeah.
different path. Mine was a little raunchy. Um,
Listen, I'm not sitting here clutching my pearls. Like, that whole thing. It's like, oh, we are not saints. I'm like, is anybody confused about that?
right.
It's
Yeah.
like we do some gnarly stuff before we get sober. I mean, I certainly did.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it took a while. So it took a few years, a few blackouts, a few plane tickets being sent, bus tickets. And then I had been beat up by the alias Sugar Bear for the last time. And I was bartending at a place called Brent's, and the sign outside said where the friendly people meet. And
Mm.
everybody in there was friendly because they took care of me. They saw I came in, my face was all distorted, and they offered me a beer with a straw. And for anybody that is in recovery or alcoholic, we know one thing, and that alcoholics will love you back to health, whether they're active or they're sober. And they were all active, and they knew what I needed, and they knew that I came from a good home. There was these people in the bar, and I called my parents, and they sent me a bus ticket, and I spent 10 hours on a Greyhound bus on the way back to Long Island, New York, and started my journey.
Wow, that's intense. I mean, we don't talk about I don't think we really talk about things like domestic violence enough. It happens to a lot of people. A lot of women have that
Mhm.
experience. And it's so demoralizing and tough to get out of. How were you able to get out of that? Did you feel trapped in that relationship and couldn't get out, or
I think I was just trapped with the alcohol and the drugs. Like I almost felt like, I only remember a few things, thank God. I
Mhm,
don't remember everything. I remember some really vicious beatings.
mhm,
Um, but I really felt like this was the life that this is what you get. You drink, you do drugs, this is how you end up. So I was not really trying to escape him. I was just like, I just didn't know how to live without alcohol and drugs. And I couldn't stay sober. So once I would start drinking, and if he came back around, I went back.
mhm.
There was no love lost there, that's for sure. Plus, he was married. So it wasn't
Right.
wasn't like he cared about me.
Yeah.
Um, I was just, some girl that was strung out on drugs and alcohol that he could, you know, pick up and drop off at the bar I used to bartend at. And
Mm.
yeah, it was a dark, dark existence.
Yeah,
Wasn't
that is
really living
dark.
at all. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So you get the bus ticket, you go home,
Mhm.
and how were you able to stay sober in the beginning? Because detox is pretty brutal, that whole
Yes.
period. Tell me about
Yeah.
that.
So the difference between this time getting sober was nobody was asking me to stop drinking. They
Mm.
were just thrilled I was alive. So I
Mm.
was in my parents' house. I was in my bedroom that I grew up in, and nobody was questioning what Sharon was going to do with her life because they were just glad I was there. So
Wow.
so I was very, very depressed. So what happened to me in my second rehab after having extended amount of time not drinking and not using drugs, fell into a depression. So that's my history, right? I
Mhm.
stopped drinking, I become suicidal, and I don't know how to get out of it. So now I am in my parents' house. I'm 21. All the people that I had grown up with were getting married or like in college, this normal like life. And here I was, just coming out of a blackout. And and I was planning my death. I was planning my death in that bedroom, and I attempted it. And thank goodness I'm still here. And my father worked at New York Hospital for 44 years, and he was seeing an employee assistance program counselor, an EAP. Thank goodness they had that at New York Hospital. And my dad, while I was away in Detroit, Michigan, was going to see this counselor. As you can imagine, my parents were fighting, almost divorced. Their daughter, it must have been, I'm sure they have not told me all the details, but they've shared with me a lot of what goes on, the tornado that is us going
Sure.
through the homes, a very peaceful home. Um, so dad was seeing this EAP counselor, and he said, you've been to so many different therapists in and out, so many rehabs, and you haven't connected with anybody, but I really think that you'd like Ben. And I said, okay, dad, well, you and I are a lot alike. So I went and I saw Ben, and I wrote a whole chapter about Tuesdays with Ben.
Mm.
And I had to take a train and, a bus to get to see Ben. And all the while thinking about like jumping in front of the train every time I went to see him in the beginning, because I really was so like, I could not imagine the darkness ever being lifted, like how I was going to function in society. And Ben was in recovery. And that saved my life because there was somebody that was willing to tell me that they too had suffered. And he asked me the most important question that anybody ever asked me, which was, are you having suicidal thoughts? And I said yes. And it was the first time I had ever said that out loud. And I felt freedom immediately from that isolation. And from there, I got the psychiatrist said, we're going to get through this. The psychiatrist, I went on 20 milligrams of Prozac for 6 months. I haven't taken anything since, but I say, hey, if you need medication, you go for it. If it's going to save your life. and I was seeing him every Tuesday, and I had recovery and the love of my family. So I had this really nice kind of trifecta around me that helped me get through those really, really dark days. But I did not work, or all I did was go to meetings.
Mhm.
Somebody would pick me up. I didn't have a car, nor would I be trustworthy to drive a car. And I would go to meetings and I would say nothing. I would just go until it started to feel better. And then, as it happens, we do recover. Took a long time, a lot of
Yeah,
work.
a lot of meetings. That's amazing that you were able to survive that dark period. It sounds
Mm,
like I think you kind of referenced that the depression lifted at some point. What was the
mhm.
turning point? Do you think was it subtle, or did you have like a moment of clarity or some kind of pivotal moment?
I think as soon as he told me I was going to take a drug to feel better, something registered, some kind of placebo effect went
Mm,
bam. Um, and I really do think that the medication coupled with the talk therapy
mhm.
with somebody who was willing to share their own life trauma. Now, I know today what it was. I know it was trauma
Right. Yeah.
that I was living through in my bedroom. I did
Mhm.
not know that until I wrote my book in 2019. I never like
Wow.
really knew that that's what the depression was,
Yeah.
because every doctor told me, and everybody that I've ever spoken to about this chemical imbalance, that's what they said. They said, "You, Sharon, you have a chemical imbalance and you're going to need a little medication and you'll be fine. You just don't have the same chemicals everybody else does." Well, in retrospect, I've been able to live without chemicals in my body for
Yeah.
27 plus years. So I don't buy into that anymore. But I do believe that whatever anybody needs to do to get well, there's no shame in any of it. But today it's just like what we talked about before. You asked me about my mental health workout, so I do a lot of work to feel good. I don't wake up, singing like I
You're not
used
Snow
to.
White singing to the
Yeah,
birds and
right. I'm like, I
yeah.
love the human race. Come talk to me. It's more like, go away.
Go away.
I'd rather
My
be
husband and I
alone.
were my husband and I were listening to a George Carlin stand-up thing, and he was talking about how he loves people individually, but as groups, he's not a fan.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes.
Yeah, I
I
totally
get
get that.
that.
You bring up something really important, which is this idea of do what you need to do to stay alive,
Mhm,
right? Like nowadays, the recovery space has changed, and we see
mhm.
people who use different kinds of medication, whether it's, medical assisted therapy like Suboxone
Yeah.
or
Mhm.
whatever. Um, that I feel like that is still a valid form of recovery. I was
Me
doing the
too.
marijuana maintenance program for the
Mhm,
first 5 months
mhm.
after I stopped drinking. I didn't know that was, they consider that what do they consider that? I guess that's kind of nowadays
A
it's medical.
substance. I don't
Yeah.
know. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I do understand the position of evolution, right? Like if you need to take medications while you're addressing root cause and
Mhm.
you can evolve to the point where you don't need that stuff, that's awesome. And
Yeah.
everybody does it at a different pace. I feel like the longer I've been sober, the less I know what's right for anyone else.
Amen.
Right.
Right. I don't care how you get sober or stay sober. I just would love it if you stayed on earth. So,
Yeah.
you
Stay
know,
alive.
stay alive. I mean, there's
Yeah.
there's definitely different ways of doing it. I don't care what anybody does. I'm pro medication and I'm pro anti medication. I'm not anything because it saved my life. I just don't buy into the story of a lot of doctors. I have the great pleasure of working with them. So
Yeah.
they're not taught about addiction,
They are
nutrition.
not.
No.
They are not. My younger son had some issues and went to an emergency room. I think he took what's it? Not. I want to say imposter drugs. That's not right. Counterfeit.
Mm.
And I think it may have been laced with fentanyl. We're not really sure because they didn't really have the test for
God.
that. But
Mm.
I asked for a doctor that was certified or board certified in addiction, and they didn't have any. And the ER doctor that we
Awful.
did talk to, he had a brother that had just died 3 years ago from, after 20 years of heroin use. He knew nothing. It's like, how is it? And when we talked about, oh, the broken road to mental health, it's like the medical profession is very uneducated about addiction in general. Like they have very little training about it.
Yes.
And the hospitals don't always employ board certified addiction specialists.
Yeah, I would say most of them don't have them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Which is
so people are
terrifying.
lost, the sad part, one of many sad parts, I got lucky, right? I had the EAP
You
counselor that
did.
was in recovery. So he knew it was going to be like us, like all of us are going to do this together. He was going to help wean me off
Hmm.
because he didn't want me to stay on this medication. He was very emphatic about that.
Right.
And then I had recovery, like I had this team. But most people get thrown into a lot of people go see their primary care doctor and say, I'm depressed. And then they get put on pills and the pills don't work for them. So then they switch and it's just a cycle. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's a big old mess out there. I get to
Yeah.
witness it in my professional life.
What do you do in your professional life? Just to clarify.
So I own a consulting company for doctors. So I have a company called the Doctor Whisperer that I've been on my own for almost 10 years now.
Oh,
But
wow.
before that, I was director of operations for New York Medical before I moved here. And then I ran a pediatric office for 8 years. And so I've really gotten to see what they really don't know.
Hmm.
I feel like more so in pediatrics because I always revealed myself to one of the bosses, so the main boss I would tell, like, I'm sober. So if you ever see me like, I gotta go at lunchtime, I'll be back. um, and then, they would become curious and ask me questions. And so then when the parents would come in and say, they have this child that's hasn't come home in 3 days, can you just go in and talk to the parents of what they can do? And, the doctors don't know about all the free resources. They would just say, well, this rehab, this rehab, this rehab, same thing that they did to my parents.
Hmm.
They're like,
Yeah.
go to a rehab. And I'm not saying that rehabs aren't great, but I didn't get sober in a rehab. I got sober when I was ready. I was done
Right.
beating the shit out of myself.
Hmm.
Um, and recovery, and it was all free.
Yeah.
So I don't think that they have access to a lot of the resources.
Yeah. They don't even know. Yeah. They don't have access and they don't even know to what questions to ask.
Yes.
Oftentimes, we were told when we had some issues, like we were like, where's the rehab? And they're like, oh, we think you're overreacting. Like from people that were in the recovery community. And I was like, no, this is,
Yeah.
yeah, it was, and the landscape has changed so much. Like I didn't know that Snapchat, they get drugs off Snapchat now.
That's
They,
not
they'll,
for me.
they get it delivered.
Hmm.
Got drugs delivered to the house and we didn't even know.
Ay, ay, ay,
Yeah.
ay.
And we are people, my husband will be 34 years sober next month. I've been sober 28 years and we didn't know. We've been so out of touch. We're all about recovery. We don't
Right.
spend a
Yeah.
lot of time talking about drugs or we don't spend any time talking about drugs or alcohol. We talk about recovery.
Right. Right.
So we were
Yeah.
not aware.
Yeah.
So the process of getting mental health help, I just interviewed a guy who is a Stanford med student, and he said that when he was considering what he wanted to do with his career, he was not attracted to mental health because there weren't enough tools. Like the tools that they have are very limited, and nowadays there are new like psychedelic assisted
Hmm.
therapies, which I find really exciting.
Hmm.
But yeah, they have I feel like a lot of the psychiatrists, the MDs, like they're kind of like, legal drug dealers in a
Yeah.
way. They're
Well,
not really
that's
addressing.
their job. They're
Yeah.
they're not therapist. So
Mm-mm.
you're going to get 15 minutes with the psychiatrist, and he's going to assess that real quick, and he's going to prescribe what he thinks is right for you. I mean, I do work with an alternative psychiatrist, thank goodness, who knows everything about recovery. And I feel very blessed even being able to say that, and has started, his own integrative medicine practice,
Brilliant.
that the foundation is mental health. But that is, hopefully that becomes more of the norm. We have a
Right.
long way to go,
Yeah.
but it is it's almost too, like, a lot of people say to me, "Oh yeah, Sharon, you work with doctors. That's, it's great. They suck at business." Well, yes, because they went to med school. Right. So
Yeah.
they're not, I'd rather them want to save my life than understand, what a good negotiated lease is. But
Right.
I also think at the same token, most people on the outside of the medical industry don't realize that that primary care doctor is not specialized in addiction, and to find those people is very hard, and to find an evolved doctor, it's a lot of work. And I do worry about, the generations coming up. Hopefully they'll continue speaking out about mental health, which it's way more main line than it once was, where it was very, very taboo, and now it's just a little bit taboo.
Yeah, I think people are really starting to open up to the idea of, getting mental health help.
Mhm.
I think it's important to sort of maybe review some of the different kinds of people that are available to help. We talk about like free resources, right? So
Mhm.
there's like 12-step programs. There's also like the suicide hotline
Mhm.
people. There's what other
988. They made it easy now. We can just dial 988 nationally.
988 is what?
988 is the suicide hotline now. There's
That's
no
just,
more 1-800. There's just, so if are you in crisis, you need mental health assistance, calling 988 is the easiest thing to remember. And then they will contact your local crisis intervention center, and have resources for you. So that's
that's
that
a
took
really important resource. Yeah.
that started in 2018, 2018, and it just became available in 2022. So there's a lot of legislation and a lot of crap that goes on for us to get help.
Yeah. 12-step communities are generally a low to no cost resource for somebody who's considering stopping their drinking, or you go to NA to stop doing drugs. You could go to SLAA to
Yeah.
address your other sex love addict issues. um Now we have a whole host. Now, being in the space, there's the recovery coaching,
Yeah.
there's a counselor, there's a therapist, but there's also trauma informed specialists, like
Yes.
people that will do EMDR, the eye movement desensitization reprocessing. I've done that. Have you ever tried that?
No, I haven't.
Oh my god, it's so good.
Yeah, I
I
totally
love
would.
therapy.
I just don't have a client that does it. Like, I have a client that does TMS and
That's a
trans.
transcranial
Mhm.
magnetic
Yep,
stimulation
simulation. Yeah, and it's amazing. If I
to
my
treat
God,
depression, right?
mhm,
Anxiety,
depression, anxiety, OCD,
OCD.
yeah,
Okay.
some levels of addiction. Even helpful for traumatic brain injury. I have a
Mm,
girlfriend that does TMS that was in a bad accident. Yeah, so there's so many now resources
yeah.
that are not just drugs.
Right. CBT is one that most people, the cognitive behavioral therapy,
Yes.
I am not a super fan of that,
Mhm.
just because it is known that it takes about 20 sessions for a client to build trust.
Mm,
And I feel like it's that safety aspect that allows, that deep hidden trauma to start coming up.
yeah. Well, I think that's why when I talk about my own mental health workout, it's a lot of different things. Like, it's never just going to be TMS that helps, or it's never just going to be recovery rooms. Like, it's a lot
Yeah.
of other things. It's a lot, so for me, I find, well, one, it's so wonderful that there are more resources than there's ever been.
Right.
I mean, my God, I've talked to sober influencers, people getting sober on Instagram, whatever
That
works,
makes, yeah, that makes, I gotta be honest, that makes me a little nervous. People with
Yeah.
like a year sober, they get excited about sobriety. And I think there's a place for like peer support, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
I'm a super peer support. Um, but what concerns me is when, people with little to no education position themselves as an expert that are willing to take money to
Yeah.
to coach you, and they don't have any credentials or training.
Well, I'm a prime example of somebody who didn't do any work until I was 5 years sober.
Yeah. And you took on
Yeah.
sponsees.
And I was
Yeah.
helping people get closer to death than anything else. So I feel that in a very, very deep way. I feel
Yeah.
like anybody that is offering any help to anybody, I hope to God you have years of work done on yourself. Even
Right.
well, I didn't write my book until I was 25 years sober for a reason. I didn't
Right.
go into helping doctors on my own consulting until I had 20 years behind me of, working in the medical industry. Like there's something to be said about
Experience.
experience. Yeah.
And
And
doing your own
mistakes
work.
and mistakes. Lots
Right.
of mistakes made.
Yeah.
Lots of bad information came out of this mouth in years past.
Yeah. Same here.
Samesies.
Same. No, I remember, it took me a while to start sponsoring other women. Yeah, I had taken the steps like immediately. I was
Mm,
so afraid I was going to relapse. I did everything. Yeah, I was lucky I got a good sponsor. And she's like, okay, we're going to start with step one. Let's get to it. We
awesome.
met every week, and she's like, go to women's meetings. And so I got lucky in that
Yes, you
sense.
did.
But I did not really start sponsoring other women for a while. I don't even know how long it was. And then those first few women that I sponsored, I was a terrible sponsor. I was completely codependent, trying to
Mhm.
rescue, trying to save. I would get a little too involved. And then I started to learn with each one of these experiences that if it was creating that sort of insanity in my own life, if I
Mhm.
lost my peace, that meant that I was out of balance and I was no longer useful to them because
Yeah.
I was no longer objective.
Mhm.
And
Totally.
so yeah, I felt bad. I was not a great sponsor. And but we have to recognize that 12-step programs are peer support. These are not
Mhm.
trained professionals. They're
Mhm.
giving their time freely. And it really is on us to be to manage our own care, right?
Yes.
To make sure, like when you're considering a sponsor, that you pick somebody who has been through the steps, who
Mhm.
has sponsored other women, who have a sponsor that are and they're continuing to work a program.
Mhm.
I think it's important to interview them a little bit, to make sure that they have what you want before you start taking advice from somebody who is
Yeah.
also suffering with mental illness.
I remember being introduced to my first sponsor and, because that's how it was done then.
Yeah.
It was like, "That woman over there is gonna be your sponsor."
Oh,
And I was like,
wow.
"Well, she has a really nice car, and, that fur coat is nice." And
Seems
really
legit.
yeah, I was like, "Okay."
Okay.
And then, all I did was listen to her tell me everything about all the other girls she sponsored.
Uh-oh.
And that
Uh-oh.
kept yeah, and that kept me silent. Like, that was
Yeah.
probably one of the I didn't share my stuff with anybody for at least 5 years. I was so afraid. So you're so right. And nobody really ever asked me to sponsor them unless I tell my story. And, then I usually have a line of young women that I
Yeah.
know none of them are gonna call me, maybe one.
Mm.
But I always say, well, why don't we just have coffee? Why don't we just get to know each other? Because you might not like me. Actually, there's a very good chance
There's
because
zero chance they would
there's
not
a
like you.
very good chance you're not going to like me because I'm not going to bullshit you. I'm going to tell you the truth and I'm only going to be here to help you through the steps. And
Right.
that's really where my job ends. So, yeah, it's different, and that's why it
Yeah.
is so important to like really find somebody that you would respect, and that
Right.
like you'd be proud to be around, you
Right.
know. I don't think anybody should have been proud to be around me in those first few years.
Yeah, I mean, we do. We can't. I remember most of the sponsors I've ever had, I've had a few, tended to be like gentle souls.
Mm,
Like they were honest with me, but they did it gently.
mm,
And I learned that it was my job. It's like my job is to be honest about what comes up for me. And
Yeah.
whether what I say resonates or not, that's for you to decide. But my only job is to, stay present and take in what you say and then just
Mhm.
share what comes up for me in an honest way. And sometimes,
Mhm.
I tell them, I go, the truth will set you free, but first it will piss you off.
Yeah.
Right. So don't be afraid if you get mad at me once in a while. You're going to get mad at me once in a while. We'll get over it. We'll get
Right.
past it. Right. Because
Yeah.
if we're dedicated to growth and change and evolution, there's going to be some bumps and sometimes it's ugly and that's just how it is. And that's fine.
Yeah, like healing and growing is actually really uncomfortable.
It's messy.
It is messy. And I live for that. Like I love,
I get it.
love uncomfortability. Please make me feel uncomfortable because I want to grow. I don't
Isn't
want
that
you to tell me
fun?
what I want to hear. Tell me to shut
Yeah.
up.
Isn't that amazing? Yeah.
Yeah.
I used to joke around that I would tell my business to anybody who would stand still long enough, before I got a sponsor. But then I got this sponsor who, would sit me down eyeball to eyeball and she would share things with me. And I could tell she got my kind of crazy. And
Yeah.
it just made me feel safe.
Mhm.
And we were able to, she would share, and we helped each other.
Yeah.
I got it very, on a deep level that we do this thing together for a reason.
Mhm. Yeah. I've been so blessed. I've had the same sponsor for 26 years or something like that.
Seriously,
Yeah.
26 years. You guys just must really work well together.
She stood up in front of the room in New York. I went to this group and she, she said the most uncomfortable things. Like she was talking about inappropriate, promiscuous. And I was like, I love you.
Well, that sounds like my girl.
Who are you?
Who are
Yeah.
you?
And that first day, like I told her everything, everything, because I knew if she could stand up in front of a room like that and be that confident and strong and that, she did all these horrible things, but look at me now.
Mhm.
Yeah, she's been a rock for a very, very, very long time. Very
That's
long time.
amazing. That's
Yeah,
amazing.
it is
So, what does
amazing.
life look like for you now?
Well, very different indeed. So today I am a happily married woman for 13 years to a beautiful man who is not in the program, who I like
Oh,
to,
that's fun.
yeah. Yes, I met him on match.com.
Ooh, that works.
It does work.
I feel so sorry for people who are single now.
Yeah,
It
like I
just
don't
seems
know
like
how to
it's so hard.
swipe or do Tinder or anything. I was one of those old people that was on match.com where I was embarrassed to be on it. It wasn't cool at all to meet anybody on the internet. And so I had to move all the way from New York to Tampa Bay, Florida to meet a man on the internet that lived 1.2 miles away. And I had a whole list of what I didn't want and what I wanted. And then I realized I was in my 30s. So, like, get over all that stuff. So, I have a beautiful stepson that I've been with since he was 3, and he's
Oh,
18
wow.
now.
Wow.
And yeah, we just watched him graduate high school. He's in college and we have a beautiful relationship. We talk very openly and candidly about mental health and
Mm.
addiction. And he read my book. It was I made him actually for my birthday one year because I wanted to have a different relationship than I had with my own
Yeah.
family. I wanted a real place to be able to feel like I could say I am messed up and I don't know what to do. Um, and that, it's okay to get help and it's okay not to be okay and all that stuff. And I own 2 businesses and I speak in corporate today about mental health in the workplace. So I spoke this morning at a college,
Oh, very cool.
which was incredible, to talk about mental health in the workplace, because I really feel like my experience as a sober woman in business and all of these people that don't know about all of these great free resources that we have that we have this gift of a design for living,
Hmm.
and people outside in the world like don't know what to do.
Right.
And yeah, so revealing myself back in 2019 was a real shock because I work with physicians, and of course my husband was like, are you sure you want to tell everybody you smoked crack? I'm like, yes, I do. because there was,
nobody would guess it by her soccer mom exterior.
Exactly. But really, people were very, very surprised.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's been a great gift for me, because now I can have these real great open discussions with not just people in recovery, but people outside of recovery and business. And we can, talk real. We don't have to speak a lingo of any sort. And I can offer them resources and tell them what I've been through, and be hope, especially for the families, right? Like you talked about your child, and I don't know how my parents survived me. And there's a lot of help out there that a lot of people don't know about. A lot of people feel really alone. So it's been a great pleasure to kind of evolve through business. I have these podcasts, but I just want to keep talking about mental health. I want somebody out there that hears this, that is contemplating suicide, because that's a real possibility.
Yeah.
That you can make it to the other side. You just have to do a ton of work.
That's all.
And ask for help. That's all. Simple.
That's all. Yeah,
and reveal yourself entirely.
Just be transparent and vulnerable, and
just change everything. You'll be fine.
Yeah. Well, when I showed up, when they told me I had to change everything, I was like, sign me up. I didn't want anything I had anyway, That was sort of my perspective. I didn't want what I had anyhow.
Yeah. Yeah. So life is very, very nerdy. I like to go to bed by 10. I like to get up by, 5. I'm an introvert. Most people don't believe that. I really would much prefer to be here with my dog laying next to me. But because of what I do for a living, I'm very in the forefront. But I love my little beautiful life that I've been blessed with through recovery and through grace of some source out there wanted me to stick around. So I enjoy all the little things today, all the little things that I get to do. My success is my happiness and content with the life that I'm privileged to live today.
Yeah, it sounds like, what I'm hearing is your life has purpose and it has meaning, and you've been able to use all of the experiences to help others. I really feel like all the darkness that we lived through make us uniquely sensitive to others, and we're uniquely qualified to help others that, all the people with the white coats, they can't help. They can't help in the way that we can.
Yeah.
It's like it's our superpower.
It really is. There's something to be said about somebody that can identify with your pain.
Yeah.
And has been there and is not judging you and doesn't want to like cure you, just wants to listen. If the best...
I do want to cure.
Oh, you do?
I'm still a people pleaser.
Oh boy. Well,
I have work to do. I've only been sober for 28 years. I still have work to do.
Well, my therapist that I went back to in the beginning of the pandemic, after my dad was diagnosed with Alzheimer's in the beginning of this year, and it's been a tough little broken road for all of us. That's why we all went to Ireland to celebrate him while he was still lucid. And my mom is still there with him now and is a great caretaker. And I went back to therapy, like I said, in the beginning of the pandemic. And, I started talking about how, I kind of arranged things for the family. You're going to go to this doctor and he's like, wow, have you ever read Codependent No More? And I was like, come on, that was so 20 years ago. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, I was like, oh yeah, I still relate to all of that. That's Charlie Brown.
Welcome. And so does Charlie.
To the show.
He relates.
He relates in a big way. But yeah, codependency is a thing.
It's still a thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Behind every alcoholic is a codependent.
I think so. I think you're right about that.
Maybe. Yeah. Well, listen, Sharon, I thank you so much for everything that you share. I want everyone to check out your book, The Broken Road to Mental Health, and your podcast. What's the best way for people to connect with you, on social media, or do you have a website? What's the best way to connect?
So yeah, I'm literally on all the platforms because I own a small boutique social media company too. So just Google Sharon Feteke. The Broken Road to Mental Health is the book, and the podcast is the same. It's, every Wednesday, and we just have conversations like this, which are my favorite things in the world to do, just to, two women trying to help each other and maybe help somebody else that's listening out there. So you can find me on all the platforms, like even TikTok.
Me too. I'm obsessed. It's my new favorite thing.
So not a great
Seems
rabbit hole.
harmless, right? I learned so much on it. It's
I
ridiculous.
literally love TikTok. Too much.
Too much.
Yes.
No such thing as half measures.
No, I'm all in.
All in. Well, listen, thank you so much for your time today. I'll leave
Thank
links
you.
to all your socials, your website, all the things, your podcast in the show notes at odatchat.com, even though the podcast name is the One Day at a Time podcast.
I love that. I love it. And thank you so much for all you do. I can't wait to have you on my show.
Oh, thanks. It'll be fun. I can't wait.
Yay.
Thanks so much. You have a great day.
You too. Thank you.